Thank you, sir. After that introduction, it is very likely that I will not rise to the level that he elevated me to. But at any rate, I have my bottle of water because I've had a bit of a cough for the last few days. So if I reach for that in a few minutes, you'll understand. Let me start by saying that I am not here to, I want to put this I want to put the presentation in the context of two things. I'm not here to exalt the virtues of driving an electric car. I've purposely entitled this Pros and Cons of Driving an Electric Car. Let me be political for just a second. I disagree with EV mandates, where people are being told that they must drive an EV, but they should be able to drive what they choose to drive. Because it works for me, doesn't mean it works for everybody else. So let me put that on the table first. Secondly, this is about EVs, not about the Tesla. Yes, that's what I personally drive, but I'm just talking broadly now about electric vehicles. I've been doing that for about 2 years. The first car was not a Tesla, it was a plug-in hybrid, but that's electrified. So I've had that experience, and now I have the experience of driving a Tesla for about a year. I don't think I'm going to go back to driving on what's called an ICE. ICE stands for internal combustion engine. I will never say never, but I think I've become so accustomed to the electrified experience that that's the lane I choose to stay in. Why am I doing it? There's an environmental argument that a lot of people put forward, and that's why some governments decide that there must be a mandate for us to drive electric vehicles. I'm what they call a climate change agnostic. I don't know whether we're doing anything to the climate or not, but I know that sucking in carbon monoxide is a good way to commit suicide. So I think that the extent that we can reduce those emissions is probably good for the planet. So why am I doing it? Apart from the environmental argument, there is also the fact that I'm very cost conscious. And I've saved, in my estimation, a lot of money over the past year driving an electric vehicle. Let me explain. My electric bill has gone up by about $20 to $30 since I've been driving, and I drive about 1,000 miles a month. When I did the cost comparison, I was looking, and I should probably ask the room what you're paying for gas monthly right now. Can anybody tell me what approximately they think, if they track it at all? What are you paying for gas each month? Do you have any idea? I'm assuming a lot of you drive.
35, 70.
My wife, who drives over 1,000, pays probably 170.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So I'm paying about $30 a month to charge my car, and I get $10 back from the electric company because they have incentives. Almost all the electric companies have incentives. In the case of Duke Energy, which is my electric supplier, they give, as long as I charge at what they call off-peak times, and they can track when I'm charging. And if I fall outside of that, then I get a little slap on the wrist and they take back their $10. That doesn't ever happen because I'm very careful about my charging habits. I was very lucky because I'm able to charge at home. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is when you don't have that option to charge at home. But I charge at home. There is an outlet that just happened to be in my garage. I was at 220, and I use that, and I wake up in the morning and I'm ready to go on a full battery. So cost was clearly one of my incentives. There's also free charging. I can tell you where all the free charges are within about a 20-mile radius of where I am right now. And I use them as much as I can. A friend of mine said, that's not going to last. When I said to him, well, neither is I, quite frankly. So I think that the fact that I can get free charging, I'm just going to take advantage of it while I can. There are also federal and state incentives for buying electric vehicles. I happen to take advantage of that as well. Very generous incentives. They have them here in the US. There are very strict conditions under which you qualify, but I try to make sure I checked all the boxes. And I did get the tax credit that was available when I was buying the car. That brings me to some of the things that people talk about when they're not happy with electric vehicles. One is the cost, which is why they have the incentives. They tend to be more expensive than regular cars. So that's one of the problems. The other problem, of course, is charging does not happen in 5 minutes. It takes, as in my case, overnight. But if you're even using what they call a supercharger, which is one of these juiced up charging stations, we're still talking about 45 minutes to an hour to get a full charge. Not a lot of people have that time. We've been planning a trip to Toronto, and one of the options that we're looking at was driving up to Toronto. And when we looked at the comparison between driving my car and driving my wife's car would have taken about 20 hours for us to go from here up to Toronto. My car, because of all the charging stuff, would have taken about 24 hours. Now, a 4-hour difference is pretty significant. So we took a pass. It's hard to understand how much more, well, I think it's not hard to understand at all. I think it's fairly easy to understand. Getting to a gas station is much, much faster and much, much easier than getting to a charging station. That should be obvious. There are many more gas stations out there than there are charging stations. That meant that was the cause of the trip going from a 20-hour trip to a 24-hour trip. It meant we had to take a certain route. It meant that we had to stop for charge. So those are things that people obviously don't like when they are considering using and buying an electric vehicle. But here's another pro: maintenance. I don't have to change oil. I don't have to worry about crankshafts and pistons and any of those other things. Those are not issues that electric car drivers ever have to concern themselves with. Maintenance costs are far, far lower. There is one issue though with tires. Maintenance for tires tends to be higher because electric cars are much heavier than gas cars, and they tend to chew up the tires much faster, and therefore you have to incur that cost a lot more. Let me close by saying that if you can't charge your car at your garage, if your daily commute is over 100 miles a day, an electric vehicle is not for you. It's not practical. So as I said, works for me, doesn't have to work for everybody. Thank you very much.